From galaxies and stars, down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers. These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range. If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere. Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist. To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. If the gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments, the universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life couldn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life. Or consider the expansion rate of the universe. This is driven by the cosmological constant. A change in its value by a mere 1 part in 10 to the 120th parts would cause the universe to expand too rapidly or too slowly. In either case, the universe would, again, be life-prohibiting.
When applied to the origin of life and the random formation of large biomolecules, probability theory clarifies the limitations of chance as a creative agent on the primordial Earth. For example, what are the odds a single protein could form exclusively through the blind interactions of chemistry? Our target is one smaller than average molecule made from 150 amino acids, each aligned to ensure a folded chain. Researchers have calculated that on the ancient Earth, the probability of success was 1 chance in 10 to the 164th power. That's 1 correctly sequenced protein chain for every 100 million trillion 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 failed attempts. But despite these enormous odds, some theorists argue that given enough time, anything is possible. Okay, let's test the validity of this opinion. We'll begin by establishing an ideal environment for chemical evolution, an imaginary world that will provide chance with every opportunity to succeed. First, we stock the oceans to capacity with amino acids. That means all the atoms on Earth, including its entire supply of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, and sulfur, are available to form 10 to the 41st complete sets of the 20 types of amino acids used to build proteins. Now let's turn the chemistry loose and see what happens. The amino acids start bonding furiously. In our experiment, an entire chain of 150 units self-assembles in only 1 second. Since all 20 types of amino acids are available, at the majority of sites, there is a 5% or 1 in 20 chance the correct molecule will align in the chain. If the sequencing is incorrect, the chain is immediately destroyed and a new assembly begins. Throughout the planet, 6,000 million billion trillion trillion attempts will take place every minute. That means in 4.6 billion years, the oldest estimated age of the Earth, the number of chains that don't fold will exceed 10 to the 58th power. It's a staggering total, but nowhere near 10 to the 164th. The trials necessary, on average, to build a protein of 150 amino acids by chance. So if undirected chemistry can't produce our coveted molecule during the entire history of the Earth, then how much time would have been needed? To find out, let's take a road trip. We'll start by erecting a bridge that spans the diameter of the observable universe, a distance of more than 90 billion light years. Then we'll place an amoeba on one end of the bridge. This single-celled organism will travel at the breakneck speed of 1 foot per year. It's off. While we wait for one protein to form, by chance, the amoeba slides along for more than 5 billion years to cross the entire universe and then return. But this race is just getting started. The amoeba takes off again, successfully reaches the far side of the cosmos, then heads back home. Yet not even one functional protein is anywhere in sight.
Given the implausibility of physical necessity or chance, the best explanation for why the universe is fine-tuned for life may very well be it was designed that way.
Mother Nature uses all kinds of mathematical languages. That when we go to understand physical phenomena, we generally find that there's some sort of mathematical underpinning to whatever the phenomena is.
A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super-intellect monkeyed with physics, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming.
There's a book that sits on my bookshelf that is unlike any other. It invites people to go out and learn about the world in order to better make sense of what was written in it and in order to prove its own authenticity beyond a shadow of a doubt. In fact, the book encourages its readers to read, learn, ponder and question things, so much so that the first word revealed from the book was read. But it doesn't stop there. The book goes on to challenge its readers, especially the scientists and scholars among them, with statements such as, "We will show them our signs in the universe and in their own selves until it becomes manifest to them that this is the truth." And these similes we put forward for mankind, but none will understand them except those who have knowledge.
A sacred text that over 1 billion people live by.
It's a rule book about how to live one's life.
And yet it holds untold mysteries.
It has the ability to provoke many meanings.
At the beginning of the 20th century, Russian physicist Alexander Friedmann and Belgian cosmologist Georges Lemaitre calculated theoretically that the universe was moving continuously and expanding. This fact was proven through observation in 1929. While examining the sky through a giant telescope, the American astronomer Edwin Hubble discovered that stars and galaxies continuously moved away from one another, and when people thought that the sun was as small as an apple. The Quran mentioned this fact centuries ago, and it stated clearly that the universe was expanding.
وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ.
The issue of how the universe came into being has always been one of the issues that scientists wondered about and discussed most. Many theories were put forward regarding the issue throughout history. Each theory was refuted in the course of time as science advanced, and they were labeled as wrong. The theory that is agreed on and is widely accepted today is the Big Bang Theory. That is, the universe was all in one piece. Then it was separated into pieces to take its current shape with a big explosion called the Big Bang. This knowledge, which scientists were able to obtain only within the 19th century, was informed by the Quran 1400 years ago.
Evidently it is what you say you have come to know 40 years back, and what you call the Big Bang is already mentioned in the book which I read, the glorious Quran. It's mentioned 1400 years ago in Surah Anbiya, chapter number 21, verse number 30, which says, Avalam yaral lazina kafaru. Do not the unbelievers see anna samawati wal arda kanat ratkan fataqnahuma, that the heaven and the earth were joined together and we clove them asunder. What you're talking about.
A pulsar is a highly magnetized, rotating neutron star that emits a beam of electromagnetic radiation. The first pulsar was observed on November the 28th, 1967, with the help of telescopes. The name pulsar is derived from pulsating star. The definition of pulsate is produce a regular, reoccurring throbbing sound. The word originates from the Latin word plare, which means to beat. They chose this name because scientists were able to record sounds of this star using high-end technology of the 20th century. The most astounding fact is that this star was described 1400 years ago in the Quran. In the 86th chapter of the Holy Quran, Allah describes a star named Tariq.
وَالسَّمَاءِ وَالطَّارِقِ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الطَّارِقُ النَّجْمُ الثَّاقِبُ.
Allah calls this star Tariq and calls it the star of piercing brightness. Now if we look at the pictures of the pulsar, we can clearly see a piercing light through the star. But there is more. Allah also called the star Tariq, which in Arabic means the beater or striker. Tariq is derived from the Arabic verb taraka, which means to strike or to beat. It also refers to someone who comes in the middle of the night and knocks on the door. You heard how the pulsar sounded in the beginning of the video, which scientists were able to hear using high-end technology of the 21st century. You can clearly hear the sound, which sounds like someone is striking or knocking on something. How could the Quran know this 14 centuries ago when there was no high-end technology?
And then he says, وَجَعَلَ فِيهَا سِرَاجًا, and in the sky he placed a lamp. He calls the sun a lamp in this case, siraj. وَقَمَرًا مُنِيرًا. The word qamar means moon. But the word munir is the one that's really scientific, if you want to take it that way. The word munir means something given light, something illuminated. So there's the source of light and the recipient of the light. When he spoke of the sun, he called it a lamp. When he spoke of the moon, he called it a moon that reflects light. So at a time when this is not a known phenomenon, Allah is speaking of the moon as a body in space that doesn't give off its own light. Nowadays, obviously it's reflecting the sun's light. But picture yourself 1500 years ago saying that. It's not very obvious. Looks like it's giving off its own light.
In the 23rd chapter, titled The Believers, from the 12th to the 14th verses, God is said to give a detailed description of how the human being is formed. It begins by saying, "We then placed him as a sperm drop in a place of settlement, firmly fixed. Then we made the drop into a alaqa. We will translate this word very soon. And then we changed the alaqa into a lump. Then we made out of that lump into bones. And then we clothed the bones with flesh. Then we caused him to grow and come into being and attain the definitive human form. In the 21st century, we can now safely say that this verse is clearly describing the process of human development in correct chronological order. However, what we should be paying attention to in particular is the second stage, referring to the development of the embryo. The specific word used to describe the embryo in this verse is the word alaqa. The word alaqa, when translated into English, can mean three separate things. Firstly, a blood clot, or to be suspended, that is to be hanging or clinging to something, or thirdly and finally, a leech. Now, all three definitions don't come anywhere near what we perceive to be the human embryo. So, why are these words used and what significance do they share with the human embryo? Can the embryo be described as a blood clot? Well, what do you think? In the third week of embryonic development, a tubular heart joins with the blood vessels to form a primordial cardiovascular system, and by the end of the third week, the blood is circulating and the heart begins to beat on day 21. The first thing that comes to mind in regards to being suspended or hanging is the umbilical cord. But we can't use that example because we are simply referring to step 2, before the baby has even formed. But we now know today that the umbilical cord is formed from the connecting stalk. And the connecting stalk is formed as soon as the embryo is formed. The embryo's connecting stalk has even been described by John Allen and Beverly Kramer as an object to suspend the developing embryo in the extra-embryonic column. So an embryo is suspended and does have a strong resemblance with the blood clot. What on earth would an embryo have to do with a leech? Figure A shows the structure of an embryo at 25 days. Figure B shows a leech. Now please note once again that the embryo in this stage is no greater than the size of a kernel of wheat. This is an X-ray of the embryo at 22 days. This is the internal structure of a leech. It's mind-blowing stuff, but you still haven't seen anything yet. This is the head of the embryo at 22 days. The detail you are seeing right now is absolutely impossible to be seen with the human eye and can only be seen with a microscope. This is the back end of a leech. There's no other words used to describe this other than mind-blowing. The pictures we have shown you are impossible to be seen with the human eye or even to be predicted by the human mind. Once again, the verses we have shown you were revealed over 1400 years ago to a man who couldn't read nor write. Are these the words of God?
Descriptions of the human embryo in the Quran cannot be based on scientific knowledge in the 7th century. The only reasonable conclusion is that these descriptions were revealed to Muhammad from God, from God, from God, from God, from God, from God.
This surah, this biggest surah, number 2, is made up of how many ayahs? 286 ayahs. Somewhere in this surah, the ayah occurs, I'll recite the Arabic first and roughly translate after. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Thus we made you a middle nation. One of the utterances in this surah that's found in here is thus we made you a middle nation. Now what's the Arabic word for middle? Wasat. The Arabic word is wasat. You don't have to know that. But know that this statement, this declaration occurs in this surah. This surah, was it written or was it delivered in the form of speech? Speech. And also, as a historical comment, it wasn't delivered at once. It took almost 10 years to be revealed. So this one surah was coming piecemeal. And while it was coming down, pieces of other surahs were also being revealed. And the messenger would instruct his companions these ayahs belong to this surah and those ayahs belong to that surah. But when the whole thing is said and done, Baqarah, the second surah, is made up of 286. And in ayah number, listen to this carefully now, in ayah number 143, the Lord says, we made you a middle nation. How many ayahs in this surah again? 286. And where does He call us a middle nation? In the middle. In the middle. Now how do you, I understand if you're going to do this in writing. I understand if you're going to do this in writing. How do you do this in speech?
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Okay? He does not know how to read or write. So how is he giving the Quran to people? He's speaking it. He's speaking it. The Quran comes down over 23 years. It's not been put in book form. It's not been put into a database. It hasn't been put into a search engine. Now it has. Now what the Prophet said has been put into a search engine. It's been put into a database. So you can actually do a search. How many times does the Quran say this word? You could do that? Could you do that back then? So now, after 23 years of this book and centuries later, we have this book in book form. This book uses the word ad-dunya. You know what ad-dunya means? This world. This book uses the word this world 115 times. 115 times. What word is used? Ad-dunya. Did anybody know that back then? They had no idea. This book also uses al-akhirah. This life, ad-dunya, al-akhirah, the next life. It uses it 115 times. This book uses the word angels 88 times. Malaika, 88 times. It uses the word devils, shayateen, 88 times. The word life occurs 145 times in the entire Quran. Al-hayat, life. You want to take a guess what else comes in the Quran 145 times? Death. Death, the word death occurs in the Quran 145 times. The word good deeds. Good deeds are mentioned 167 times. As-salihat and as-sayyi'at, bad deeds, 167 times. The word disbelief is mentioned 17 times. Belief is mentioned 17 times. Iblis is mentioned by name 11 times. Seeking refuge from Iblis is mentioned 11 times. They said, the phrase they said occurs 332 times. And the Quran says, say 332 times. How is it possible that in like 23 years of revelation, he uses the word month only 12 times? Yeah. Days actually only used 365 times. There's just a few. Just word counts. Is that humanly possible? But just think about that. Is that humanly possible? Somebody speaks for 23 years, doesn't write any of it down, and these words seem to line up perfectly.
The Quran never makes any mistakes in any fields, though it gives information about such different issues. On the contrary, it exhibits miracles that amaze people whose eyes and hearts are not blinded in all fields. It is impossible for an illiterate man who lived 14 centuries ago to know and mention all of these things on his own. Then the Quran can only be the book of the being that created the universe. For the Quran miraculously mentions everything that the book of the universe includes, and all of its news turns out to be true.
قل الحمد لله وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى الله خير أما يشركون أمن خلق السماوات والأرض وأنزل لكم من السماء ماء وأنزل لكم من السماء ماء فأنبتنا به حدائق ذات بهجة ما كان لكم أن تنبتوا شجرها أإله مع الله أإله مع الله بل هم قوم يعدلون أمن جعل الأرض قرارا وجعل خلالها أنهارا وجعل لها رواسي وجعل بين البحرين حاجزا أإله مع الله أإله مع الله بل أكثرهم لا يعلمون